Sixth domestic policy issue, PFI, Private Finance Initiative. I think it's horrible. We shouldn't have it. We shouldn't take any more private finance initiative deals on. Here's how it works. If the government wants to build a school or a hospital or some other bit of infrastructure, it hasn't got any money, it can't borrow it because that will increase the national debt, and it's agreed with the EU not to get over a certain percentage of our GDP, of our gross national income, as the national debt. So what's it going to do? It feels it has to do something because it wants to get elected, so it wants to be building stuff that the government, that the public like, and that it'll vote for them because of a new hospital or a new school or something. What the government does is it turns to the private sector. It puts together, it encourages to assemble a consortium of a building company, a services maintenance company, and a financier. The financier puts up the money to pay the builder, and they design, build and operate the school or hospital or whatever it is for a certain period, usually 35 years. The government pays nothing at first. It doesn't appear on the government's balance sheet, but then once it's operating, there are regular payments to be made for the life of the project, which is usually something like 35 years. Trouble is, it's a very expensive way of doing it. It's much more expensive than the government building it out of tax money, or even out of borrowing money through issuing bonds or some such means. So it's very expensive. It's also a bit deceitful, really, because it is borrowing, even though the people who are having to pay back are not this generation, but our children and grandchildren, which I don't think is the right way to proceed. It's not very nice on them to be settling them with the debt for something that really we should have paid for in our generation or not built at all. Another problem is that to alter the building, if you want to sort of knock down a wall somewhere and use the building in some slightly different way because you've discovered that that's what you need to do in a hospital or a school, then it's really difficult to do that, because you then have to go back through lawyers and people like that to haggle over how much that's going to cost and so on, and it's very difficult. And there've been schools, I think it's schools, maybe even hospitals as well, that the government has then decided, has built and then decided it doesn't need, but it's still got to continue paying the annual repayment for the life of the project anyway. And these contracts are once it's done and operated, that's most of the risk, that it'll cost the contractors more than they thought it would. That risks then sort of reduces greatly. And there's a secondary market in these PFI contracts. It's just trade on the market. But the poor old government's got to got to keep paying the annual charge. Another really pernicious thing is if it's say a hospital, and it has a shrinking budget to pay for healthcare for their particular area, they can't shrink the payments to the PFI consortium, because that's already set in stone. It's a legally binding commitment, and so everything else has to suffer disproportionately, which means laying off doctors and nurses and people like that just in order to pay the PFI consortium. So I hate it. I don't think it's the right thing to do, and it's sort of deceitful. I don't think it should have been entered into in the first place. The present government has apparently said that it thinks it's bad anyway, but it's still carrying on doing it, and it's obfuscated. I've tried to write and get a sensible answer for things, but you just get battered around from pillar to post. There's a private, I've forgotten what it's called now, it's a sort of arm's length organisation that deals with private, public-private partnerships, which is another word for it. And they say it's up to the Treasury. If you write to the Treasury, you don't really get a sensible answer that I can understand. And I don't think it's the right way to go. It's just a function of the fact that we've run out of money, and we want to, the government wants to build things to remain popular, to get re-elected, or because they're really essential. But unfortunately, some of them may not actually be really essential. And our children and grandchildren are saddled with this debt. I think we should stop it and not enter into any more PFI contracts. Thanks.